Hey, and welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Today we're taking a close look at a specific but really impactful part of the global healthcare landscape.
Mm-hmm.
We're diving into the market for a medication called Aprepitant.
Right, Aprepitant. It's a vital drug in support of cancer care, its main job. And it's a really critical one for, patient well-being, is helping manage that severe nausea and vomiting you often get with chemotherapy.
Yeah, absolutely crucial stuff.
It really is. It's all about improving quality of life during treatment.
Definitely. And our guide for this deep dive is an outlook report from Cognitive Market Research. It gives us a forecast for the Aprepitant market looking all the way out to 2033.
So yeah, our mission today is basically to unpack this report. We want to pull out the key trends, maybe some surprising growth areas, and the regional dynamics that, tell the story of where this market is heading.
Okay, cut through the noise of the data.
Exactly. Help you understand what's really going on.
Okay, let's unpack it then. What's the big picture? How does the global market for Aprepitant look right now, and where is it going?
Well, what's interesting is this really consistent positive trend. The report indicates that back in 2021, the global market revenue for Aprepitant was just under $90 million, $89.72 million specifically.
Right, so that's our baseline from a couple of years back. How does that change moving forward?
It shows pretty significant and steady growth. By 2025, which, is almost here.
Right around the corner.
Yeah, the report projects it'll hit $113.7 million. And then looking further out to 2033, it's forecast to almost double that 2021 number. It climbs up to $182.59 million.
Wow, nearly doubling in, about 12 years for a supportive care drug. That really says something about its importance, maybe even expanding use cases.
It certainly does. That projected growth translates to a global compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of 6.1%.
Okay.
Which is, a solid rate. It really underlines its established role in chemo support and suggests demand isn't really slowing down.
So the global view is clearly strong. But, like we always say, healthcare markets can look very different depending on where you are in the world. Is this growth picture uniform?
Oh, definitely not. Now, the report does a good job breaking this down regionally. Let's maybe start with where the market's biggest right now.
And I'm guessing that's probably North America.
You got it. North America holds the strongest position currently. The report states the region generated about $30.7 million in revenue back in 2021.
Okay, so roughly a third of the global total right there.
Precisely. And North America is expected to keep growing, reaching $38.1 million in 2025, and then $59.9 million by 2033.
So it holds on to that lead in terms of, sheer size, even as the whole pie gets bigger. What about the growth rate there? Is it keeping pace globally?
Actually, North America's CAGR is a little below the global average. It comes in at 5.8%.
Interesting. And is that growth spread evenly across the U.S., Canada, Mexico?
Not quite, no. The U.S. really dominates the North American market. The U.S. figures were $24.1 million in 2021, growing to $29.5 million in 2025, and projected to hit $45.6 million by 2033. So, yeah, that's the lion's share right there.
So the U.S. is a mature, large base. What about its neighbors then, Canada and Mexico?
Well, this is where it gets kind of interesting. While they're smaller markets, Canada and Mexico actually show faster growth rates.
Oh, okay.
Canada's market was $4.2 million in 2021, projected to reach $9.1 million by 2033. Mexico started at $2.4 million in 2021 and is forecast to grow to $5.2 million by 33.
And the report flags something specific about their speed, doesn't it?
It does. Both Canada and Mexico have the same projected CAGR, 6.5%, which is faster than the U.S. rate of 5.6% and the overall North American average.
So that higher growth might suggest increasing access or maybe maturing healthcare systems in those countries?
Could be. Yeah, maybe increasing access to these kinds of advanced supportive treatments. It's a good point.
That's a key takeaway. Yeah, growth isn't just size, it's also acceleration. Okay, let's shift gears. Across the Atlantic, how does Europe look for Aprepitant?
Europe's another significant established market.
Yeah.
The report valued the European market at $25.8 million in 2021, so just a bit behind North America in size.
Okay.
And it's anticipated to grow steadily, $31.6 million in 2025 and $49.1 million in 2033.
And the growth rate there, similar to North America.
Very similar, actually. Europe's CAGR is 5.7%. So, a stable, pretty consistent growth picture overall.
And for listeners interested in specific European countries, Who are the main players according to the report?
Well, it highlights several key ones. Germany's a major player, going from $5.3 million in 2021 to a projected $9.6 million in 2033. That's a 5.3% CAGR.
Okay.
The UK is also significant, moving from $3.7 million up to $6.8 million by 2033, showing a 5.5% growth rate. And France is another key market, $4.2 million growing to $7.7 million by 2033, with a 5.4% CAGR.
So those are kind of the big three within Europe.
Right. But then you have other notable countries like Italy and Spain also showing solid growth. Their CAGRs are actually a bit faster, around 6%.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, slightly quicker than Germany, UK, France, and even the smaller markets.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Than Germany, UK, France, and even the smaller markets grouped as rest of Europe contribute to that steady regional trend. So the picture is really one of widespread, consistent adoption across Europe. Reflects established healthcare systems, I think.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've covered the major established markets in North America, Europe showing that solid, reliable growth. But you mentioned the report pointed to one region that's like the fastest growing globally. Where's that?
Ah, yes. That would be Asia Pacific. The report specifically flags APAC as the engine of the fastest future growth. Their revenue was $23 million back in 2021.
Okay, so starting from a smaller base compared to North America and Europe.
Exactly. But look at the projection. It's forecast to reach $30.6 million by 2025 and then really accelerate, hitting $51.7 million by 2033.
That is a big jump. What's driving that kind of speed?
Well, the Asia-Pacific CAGR is projected at 6.8%. That's noticeably higher than the global average and definitely higher than North America and Europe. This accelerated growth is, I think, a really key takeaway here. It suggests, rapidly expanding access to advanced cancer care, and as a result, more demand for supportive therapies like Aprepitant.
And within APAC, which countries are really leading that charge?
China is the largest market in the region. It goes from $8 million in 2021 up to a pretty significant $18.7 million by 2033. That's a 7% CAGR.
Right.
But maybe even more striking is India. Starting from $3.4 million in 21, it's projected to hit $8.2 million by 2033. And it boasts the highest CAGR in the entire region, 7.3%.
Wow, India's pace is really something else there. Any other strong performers in APAC?
Yeah, definitely. Japan, while it's a more mature market, still shows healthy growth. $4.2 million to $8.7 million, that's a 6.1% CAGR. South Korea is projected to basically double from $2.7 million to $5.5 million.
Okay.
And then you've got Australia and Southeast Asia, both showing really high growth rates. Australia's got a 7.2% CAGR. And Southeast Asia actually matches India at 7.3% CAGR, moving from $2.3 million to $5.5 million.
So Asia-Pacific isn't just one story. It's like a collection of different markets, but many of them showing exceptional acceleration. That signals a pretty major shift in where demand is growing globally.
Absolutely.
Let's look south now. What about Latin America?
Latin America also fits into this picture of, expanding access and growth. Brazil leads the market there. It's projected to grow from $3 million in 2021 to $6.3 million in 2033 with a 6.3% CAGR.
Solid.
Yeah. Argentina actually shows an even faster pace. From $1.4 million to $3.2 million, that's a 6.9% CAGR. And Colombia stands out too, projected to more than double, from $1 million to $2.3 million by 2033, which is a 7.1% CAGR.
So also seeing some of that higher than average growth. Any other countries in LATAM highlighted for particularly strong performance?
Yes, the report calls out Peru and Chile. Peru goes from $0.6 million to $1.4 million by 33, a solid 6.8% growth rate. And Chile shows one of the highest growth rates globally, projected to jump from just $0.5 million to $1.2 million by 2033. That's a striking 7.3% CAGR.
Wow, 7.3% in Chile. That puts it right up there with India and Southeast Asia, rate-wise, even though it's starting smaller. That's the kind of specific detail that really jumps out.
It really does.
Okay, finally, let's just quickly touch on the Middle East and Africa.
Right. This region is the smallest contributor overall, but it still shows growth. Egypt is projected for steady progress from $0.7 million in 2021 to $1.5 million by 2033. That's a 6.2% CAGR. Turkey is forecast to double from $0.4 million to $0.8 million with a 6.5% growth rate.
And did the report mention the sort of the smallest piece of the global market here?
It did, yeah. The rest of the Middle East segment was the smallest identified in the report, only $0.1 million in 2021, growing to $0.2 million by 2033. And it showed the lowest CAGR mentioned anywhere at 3.9%.
Okay, so present, but definitely not accelerating like other regions.
Exactly. Not the same pace at all.
So if we kind of pull all these numbers together, the report paints a pretty clear picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You have the established markets, North America and Europe, providing a strong base, steady growth.
Right, the foundation.
But the real acceleration, the faster growth, is happening in places like Asia-Pacific and parts of Latin America, even some parts of the Middle East and Africa.
Precisely. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, the report confirms Aprepitant is a market really gaining traction globally. Its core role in managing chemo-induced nausea is constant, right?
Yeah.
But the key drivers for this growth, according to the report, aren't just stable demand. It's also that significant expansion in emerging economies, which we've seen reflected so clearly in those higher regional CAGRs.
And you mentioned earlier, didn't you, that the report also pointed to potentially expanding applications?
Yes, it specifically calls out the potential impact of expanding applications. Things like use in pediatric care, so for children.
Oh, interesting.
And also the development of alternative formulations, different ways to give the drug. So that suggests the market isn't just relying on the same patients in the same old format. New patient groups, maybe easier ways to administer the drug.
Yeah.
That could open up even more growth, contributing to that, nearly doubling projection by 2033.
Right. So for you, the listener, trying to track shifts in global healthcare and pharma markets, this deep dive into Aprepitant gives us a window into a few things, I think. It definitely shows the ongoing critical need for supportive care in cancer treatment.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
No.
And it highlights how demand for specific therapies, like this one, tends to follow the expansion of advanced medical treatments into new regions.
Yeah, and it kind of points to where future investment and access and maybe even innovation in, say, drug formulation might be focused in the specific therapeutic area. That's like a snapshot of how those big global health dynamics play out in market realities.
It really is. This deep dive into the Aprepitant market outlook from Cognitive Market Research gives us a clear picture of a market that's not just stable, but actively growing, and especially growing in regions undergoing significant healthcare development.
Yeah, it provides a strong, data-driven look at where this particular piece of supportive oncology care seems to be heading.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you to chew on as you process all this. Given that the report projects this supportive care market will nearly double by 2033, with the highest growth rates concentrated in emerging economies and potentially expanding uses like pediatric care, what does that tell us about the evolving landscape of global cancer treatment over the next decade? Not just the primary therapies, but the crucial support systems around them.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep into Aprepitant today. A medication that plays a really crucial role supporting patients through chemotherapy.
Absolutely key.
Yeah, and our source is this market dynamics report focused right on this drug. So our mission really is to pull out the key insights.
Understand its function, the market.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Really is to pull out the key insights.
Understand its function, the market forces.
Exactly. And, where its story might go next based on what the report is telling us.
And the report, it wastes no time defining its importance, does it? It calls it a cornerstone in antiemetic therapy.
Cornerstone, right?
Basically a fundamental drug to stop nausea and vomiting. And that's just critical for cancer patients.
And you immediately get why it's needed when you think about chemo.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, one of the worst side effects is that CINV chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting.
Right, CINV. It can hit straight away or sometimes days later. Really impacts quality of life.
Massively.
Precisely. And with global cancer rates, they're rising, so more people get chemo.
Which directly drives demand for managing CINV effectively.
Exactly. And Aprepitant, it's designed for both those phases, the acute and the delayed, so it's a key part of that solution.
Okay, so thinking about growth, what forces does the report highlight? What's driving the Aprepitant market?
Well, a major one is this clinical shift towards multimodal therapy.
Multimodal.
Yeah, the insight here is that just one type of antiemetic, often not enough for some chemo regimens.
Right.
So guidelines increasingly recommend combining things. You take an NK1 antagonist like Aprepitant, and you add others like 5-HT3 antagonists, corticosteroids.
So like a multi-pronged attack on the nausea pathways.
Exactly that, hitting it from different angles. And this combo approach is particularly recommended for chemo that's known to be highly immunogenic, likely to cause nausea.
Okay.
So this push from clinical guidelines, it really boosts adoption.
And that's probably across the board, adults, kids.
Increasingly in pediatric oncology, too, yeah. And another driver, growth in emerging markets.
Ah, that makes sense. As healthcare systems improve globally.
Right. Think Asia-Pacific, Latin America, the Middle East. You're seeing real improvements in healthcare infrastructure there. Plus, there's just a growing focus on patient quality of life during treatment in these areas.
So better access, more focus on supportive care.
Leads to increased use of drugs like Aprepitant, where maybe it was less common before.
Okay, so that paints a picture of, strong need, growing markets, but the report must flag some challenges too.
Oh, yes. Some pretty significant ones.
What's the biggest headwind for the market then?
The primary restraint, and it's a familiar story in pharma, is patent expiration.
Ah, the patent cliff.
Exactly. Once the original drug's patents run out, generic versions just flood the market.
And that must completely change the landscape.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Huge revenue drops for the branded drug, intense price competition from generics, pricing power just evaporates.
Especially in cost-sensitive systems, I imagine.
Definitely. Generics quickly dominate. It effectively commoditizes the drug.
Okay, so beyond market competition, any issues with the drug itself or how it's used?
Well, it's generally well tolerated, but it does interact with drugs metabolized by a common liver enzyme pathway, CYP3A4.
Okay.
And in oncology, patients are often on multiple medications, polypharmacy.
Right.
So managing those potential interactions, it adds complexity. The report also lists some potential side effects, usually mild, things like dizziness, hiccups, maybe fatigue.
And is Aprepitant used much beyond CINV? For other things?
Its main focus, its primary approval, is really firmly on CINV.
Got it.
Now, it can be effective for PONV, that's postoperative nausea and vomiting and maybe some other GI issues, but its application is, well, relatively narrow.
Which limits its broader market potential compared to drugs with wider uses.
Exactly.
Okay, so facing that generic pressure, that focused use, where does the report see potential? What's next?
Innovation in formulation is a big one.
Formulation, like how it's delivered.
Yeah. You got the oral capsules, sure, but now also intravenous options like fosaprepitant. And the insight there is patient flexibility. Offering different ways to get the drug is crucial, especially if someone's struggling to swallow pills during treatment.
Yeah, that adds real practical value for patients and clinicians.
It really does. Another area is that pediatric expansion we touched on.
Right, using it more in kids' cancer care.
Yeah, recent regulatory approvals, growing awareness. It's getting included more often in protocols for children on chemo.
And what about completely new uses? Is research looking beyond nausea from treatment?
Absolutely, and that's a key future trend highlighted. Studies are looking into its potential beyond just chemo nausea.
Like what?
Radiation-induced nausea, for instance, certain chronic GI disorders, even opioid-induced nausea.
Interesting.
Plus, there's ongoing work on new combination therapies and sort of advanced delivery systems, too.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together from the source material. Aprepitant, essential drug for managing tough chemo side effects, boosted by that move to combination therapies and expanding markets.
Right, but under significant pressure from generics.
And it has a relatively focused application right now.
Correct. But its future story, well, it could involve these new formulations, making things easier for patients.
And potentially expanding its reach into totally new medical areas through all that ongoing research.
That seems to be the direction.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a question to think about. Given this push for new applications and formulations, right alongside that intense challenge from generics, how might the future availability and maybe the cost of this really crucial supportive care drug evolve for patients, across the globe?
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.